Hey, what's up? Hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be talking about what I love about storytelling in books. If you haven't noticed yet, I love books. I have read hundreds of books in my lifetime, as my love of reading started as a child. So today I thought we could have a fun little chit chat about what elements I love in books. And when I'm done talking about each element, I will be giving you guys just a few quick recommendations if those are some of your favorite aspects too. I want to start off by thanking today's sponsor, which is Campfire Technology. Campfire Pro is a computer program built for writers building their own worlds. It gives you the ability to create chapter outlines, maps, an endless timeline, character profiles, relationship webs, and more all in one place. They also have a world-building expansion pack that allows you to create magic systems, create new species, and build cultures with brand new languages and religions. Though I am currently not a writer, if I were writing, this is exactly the type of program I would totally rely on, which is why I really wanted to give them a shout out. When I do envision myself as an author, I see myself having this big encyclopedia of all of the information I need for my story, and Campfire has a lot of features that make that possible. Campfire has a 10-day free trial that you can download using the link in the description, or else it is a one-time purchase of $49.99. So if there are any aspiring authors out there looking for ways to upgrade how you organize your stories, I really hope you give them a try. To start off my favorite elements of storytelling, I'm going to talk about writing style. If you're a longtime viewer of mine, you may know that in the past, writing was not something I ever prioritized. I've always had this philosophy that I can set aside mediocre or bad writing for the sake of an entertaining story, but I honestly think that really derived from the fact that I used to not know what good writing was. The marker of good prose for me is when I really have to sit back and pause to ask the author, how did you do that? How did you string these words so perfectly together, taking what would otherwise be an unremarkable sentence, but through your particular word choice and syntax, making it something unique and powerful? I love a writer that makes me think, oh, I could never write like that. A big pet peeve of mine in reading is when I feel detached from a story. I'm not sure if this makes sense to any of you, but I hate feeling like I'm physically reading a story. I much prefer to feel like I'm engaged and immersed in it. And writing that is clunky, unnatural, and not fleshed out is the easiest way to draw me out of that. Therefore, I love very descriptive writing that gives me various different senses to latch onto, making it easier to visualize in my mind. I don't love purple prose, where excessive use of adjectives and figurative language can really detract from the character's point of view, but I love an author that is really able to make a story transcend the page. When it comes to perspective and tenses, I don't really feel like I have a preference. I think I tend to gravitate more towards first-person books because I like feeling like an active member of the story, but some of my all-time favorites are written in third person. That said, I almost always struggle to get invested in a present tense book. Past tense is my comfort zone. It's what feels right to me and is easier for me to read, whereas present tense always feels like work. I also really love quotable lines, ones that will often make statements greater than the book itself and follow me way longer than the memories of the actual story. Writing is not the singular most essential element in reading for me. I do feel that I give a little bit more leniency to amateur writing than some other reviewers, but all that means is that when a writing style is really able to blow me away, it's even more notable. If you're looking for recommendations based on a great writing style, my first is absolutely going to be With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, or honestly any of her other works. Her two other published books are actually written in verse or poetry, so it is very different from what I typically read, but she just has the most uncanny talent for describing thoughts and feelings and human experiences that it sticks with me long after I finished the book. My next recommendation is My Dark Vanessa by Cait Elizabeth Russell. This is a story about sexual abuse, but it honestly made me finish it in 2 days just because the writing was so decadent and delicious. I could not get enough. The author had been working on this book for like 16 years, and it was used as her thesis for her PhD in creative writing, and you can absolutely tell all of the effort and craft that went into this writing. And my final recommendation for writing style is going to be The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book unfortunately does not come out until October, but it was absolutely one of my favorite books of the year. I don't know if you can see like all of these doggy-eared pages that I have, but they are almost all just like really really beautiful quotes that just struck my heart in a newfound way, and I was just absolutely blown away by V.E. Schwab's talent. Another essential part to storytelling is, of course, the characters. I definitely don't think I have a favorite type of character. I love a kind hero, but I'm absolutely always falling for a super fucked up villain. And morally ambiguous characters or anti-heroes that make me question my every thought, value, and action, don't even get me started. Some aspects that are incredibly important to me when it comes to characters are that they have a unique personality, a distinct voice, a strong motivation, growth throughout the story, and absolutely honest and intentional flaws. But I do always want them to be grounded in reality, that way I can still relate to them and hold on to their humanity. Though characters are the lens in which we experience a story, and I of course am always going to prioritize well-rounded, complex characters, I find that I am able to identify stories that have a weak cast and still enjoy them. Ultimately, there's not one make it or break it element when it comes to books. Anything that is going to provide me something was worth reading. When I think of well-developed characters, the first series that comes to mind is the Charlotte Holmes series by Brittany Cavallero. This is sort of a retelling of the story of Sherlock and Watson. Jamie and Charlotte are two of the most layered and developed characters I have ever read about. Individually and together, their story is just absolutely fulfilling. My next recommendation for a wicked cast of characters is of course going to be Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This follows a rock band set in the 1960s and 70s, and one of the first things I will always say about this book is that the characters feel so real. It is like impossible to accept the fact that they are not real people who existed in our same timeline, because you really get to know them at a very intimate level. And though I could go on forever about the many incredible casts and found families that I've read in literature, one that always stands out to me is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This story follows six very different people brought together to pull off the heist of a lifetime, and just each character and perspective is so individual with a complex backstory, and again, their interactions together are what really make it work. My next favorite element in storytelling is the plot. I have always considered myself a plot-based reader because my main motivation for reading has always been entertainment. Fantasy and thrillers are two of my all-time favorite genres, and I think that comes from the fact that I love adventure. I always want to be taken on a journey that goes far beyond my own. I live for plot twists. Some of my favorite encounters while reading are when the author is able to change the entire course of the story based on one big reveal that has silently been building the entire time. I've never considered myself particularly good at guessing plot twists or endings, so I feel it's not that hard to surprise me. I feel like a great twist is one that shocks you but also allows you to say, I should have seen that coming. Even if I can guess the way a plot is going, I'm usually not disappointed. I'm actually proud of myself for figuring it out. It just excites me to read a complex story where each event leads up to the next. For me, plot is really where the action and excitement of the story is. Plot has always stood out to me as something I really prioritize in literature because that is where most of the action and excitement and conflict of this story is, and that is what keeps me engaged and entertained as I'm reading. First up on my recommendations for plot-based novels is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. One of my absolute favorite things about Scythe was the incredible plot twists. There were so many points in the story where, like, I thought I had figured it out and I knew where things were going, and as soon as I got that comfort, it totally derailed and went in a different direction. I was never bored, constantly entertained, and I really, really loved it. On that same note, I would recommend Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This is a pretty gruesome thriller with lots of dark themes, but once again, like, I never knew where this story was going. The storyline was super disturbing and therefore interesting, and Karen Slaughter is just like a master writer, so I would definitely recommend this one. And my other recommendation is Let Me Hear a Rhyme by Tiffany D. Jackson, which takes place in 1990s Brooklyn, and it follows a group of friends who are trying to make their recently deceased friend a famous musician without anyone knowing he's passed. A gripping synopsis like that will always get me to read a book, and there was just so much excitement and, like, I don't even know what the word is to describe the storyline of this story, but it brought me so much joy. As I stated, fantasy is one of my favorite genres, so naturally world building and magic systems are other elements I love to explore in books. I mostly read for entertainment and escapism. I love reading books that take place in worlds different from my own, be it one that I want to live in or a future that's disturbing to think about. I love fantastical worlds because they allow us to consider what life would be like if we had these different powers, abilities, and advancements. I've been reading fantasy novels since I was a kid, but I discovered YA literature right around the height of the YA dystopian craze, and at that time I discovered the same love I had for teenagers using magic extended to teenagers taking down corrupt governments. As the hype for dystopians has died down over the last few years, I've become more involved in what I would consider speculative fiction, meaning books that take place in a world that closely resembles our own, but key aspects usually based in fantasy or science fiction have completely changed how the world functions. On that same note, I have always gravitated towards what is considered low fantasy, meaning that magic exists in our world today. I just love to envision entire worlds of magic and creatures going on right as we speak. And of course, with the lingering hope that I could one day join those worlds. I do like high fantasy and have read many incredible books that take place in total alternate worlds brimming with magic, but it does take significantly more for me to be interested enough to try them. I think my reluctance to pick them up as frequently stems from the fears I had as a teenager that I wasn't smart enough to understand high fantasy just because they took more effort to conceptualize and understand, but as I read more high fantasy, I realize how much more I actually do enjoy them. Regardless of any sort of magic system or world building, it is imperative that it has logic and adheres to that logic. There has to be rules and limits and dangers to what people can accomplish, and those factors must be consistent throughout the entire story. That said, I always want a magic system to develop over time, especially if it's a long-standing series. There has to be some sort of change that propels new conflict, and I want to watch the story expand. But I also love to see classic magical creatures, gods, demons, mythology, and folklore. It all interests me. Some of my recommendations for books with exceptional world building and magic systems. My first is going to be the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, or kind of anything he writes because I've been pleased by all of his books that I've read. Rick Riordan's books have always been grounded in different forms of mythology, and even though I don't always know the origins of the magic systems he is building upon, they're always intriguing and interesting and so well developed. Next up, I'm going to recommend my all-time favorite, The Shadowhunter Chronicles by Cassandra Clare. What I absolutely love about this series is not just all of the magic in it, but the way in which the world has changed and transformed over time. These books span over 100 years, and within that time, each individual series is so unique and brings something new to the table. And my other recommendation is going to be Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. Ace of Shades really impressed me with its complex hierarchical magic system. There are just so many different layers and levels to it. There's a strong history behind all of the different powers. I'm just so excited for the last book in the series to come out this year. The final element I love in storytelling is a pretty broad one, and that is the inclusion of real-life issues. Examples would be social justice topics like race, gender, sexuality, and religion, but also mental health, trauma, family dynamics, friendship, and so much more. I love reading about these topics because they either allow me to relate to this story or give me insight on what other people have been through. I love when a book gives me the opportunity to reconsider how I feel about a particular issue or experience and do some deep reflective work on where I might have been uninformed or misguided. Especially as somebody working in the counseling field, books are a way for me to help better serve my clients. Reading a book from a person with a similar perspective allows me to understand them better and therefore help them better. I've reached a point where I'm significantly more disinterested in a book, especially contemporaries that don't involve these issues. I've just read so many of the same stories over the years, the same romances and tropes, that the inclusion of different identities, experiences, perspectives, and conflict keep it feeling fresh and new. The first book that comes to mind for me is Your Welcome Universe by Whitney Garner. This book follows a deaf Indian girl who is forced to go to a mainstream school. Not only are those themes explored really well, but there's also such a beautiful friendship between two girls in this story. There's no romance, which is totally different from a lot of YA contemporaries, and also the main character is a really talented street artist. It was just fabulous and I highly recommend it. Another recommendation I have is Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a story that talks about sexual assault, but also gender and sexual identity. This book is hard-hitting and heartwarming in the best possible way. And my final recommendation would be Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This story follows a mother and daughter who are Black and move to a very elegant, rich, white community, but there is sort of a custody battle going on about a Chinese American baby and sort of how that conflict influences the whole community. Naturally, there are so many other elements to storytelling in books that I love. Comedy, romance, mystery, setting, conflict, and so much more. I think this could be a really cool series for me to delve into some of these other topics with more depth, so if that's something you'd like to see more of, please let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, I would love to hear what elements you love in storytelling and books. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you soon for a new one. Bye!